Hello everybody, thank you for coming today. Today is day 3 of International Education Week, and we use this week to celebrate the benefit of international education and exchange worldwide. So today I'm going to introduce you Dr. Yasuko Taoka. She is from Japan and she's going to tell a little bit about her country. Please, let's give her a applause.
Hi everybody, thank you so much for coming. When Becky came down, she said hi to me. She said, "Are you nervous?" And I said, "I wasn't until I saw how many people are there." For comparison, when I interviewed for my position, I think there was like 10 people in the room. So this is quite an improvement. The talk itself is going to be fairly short, and it's actually not going to be very much about Japan, so I hope you won't be sorely disappointed. The talk will be fairly short, maybe 15 minutes or so, and then I hope we'll have a lot of time to do Q&A and discussion, and for you to share kind of some of your stories, maybe some of your parents' stories, or your grandparents' stories that you might have heard. So I was told this was going to be on Facebook Live, so I wrote out my talk. Okay, so by the way, thank you all for coming. This is, like I said, a lot more people than I expected. A ton of people from arts and humanities. Thank you so much for coming out. And you're not even getting extra credit for this. So yeah, thanks so much. Okay. So when I took this job, many people on campus were concerned about whether I'd fit in. Well, I don't. What people didn't know is that I never really fit in anywhere. I spent my life moving around, living between cultures and communities, so I don't really know how to respond when people say to me, "So where's home for you?" It can be unsettling not to feel like you belong anywhere. But what I've also learned is that there's a distinct advantage to living in between. You learn to see multiple perspectives and to empathize with different types of people. You have empathy for a broader spectrum of people. And you become adaptable and resilient, not wedded to specific locations and objects. It's important, of course, to recognize that places and things have significance for you. But a little bit of distance can also give you the perspective to appreciate them better. So today I'd like to share with you some stories from my upbringing, focusing on some instances when I felt in between groups. And as I said, I hope we'll also have some time for y'all to share your experiences as well. So the term for this is liminality or liminal. How many of you know the term subliminal? Catherine, you're not allowed to answer. So what does subliminal mean? Like if it's subliminal messaging, what's that?
Not seen or below the surface.
Yeah, it's like it's so like in a commercial, it might be something that you don't actually see, but it's kind of talking to your brain. Good. So since my research is in Latin language and literature, I have to go back to the origin of the word. So liminal or liminality comes from the Latin word limen, as I've typed up there in italics, and it means threshold. Threshold isn't a word that we use much anymore. How many people have used the word threshold recently? Oh, quite a few. Of course. That surprises me. In the Roman world, it refers to a place where two rooms meet, kind of like a doorway, right? It's kind of fancy, schmancy word for doorway. So you're not in one room, and you're not in another room. You're kind of in between. Anthropologists and psychologists have now started to use the word liminal to refer to a transitional period in a person's life, like when they're growing from childhood to adulthood. And they've emphasized the unsettling feelings of unease and chaos that people in a liminal state can experience. And that's certainly true. But I also think that we grow in that experience. Just as adults, we can look back on our years as teenagers with an appreciation for that period of growth, right? Even though you look back on your teenage years and you're like, oh, that was horrible, or I didn't feel like I fit in, you kind of appreciate that you went through that process. So I came to the United States when I was 2 years and 10 months old. I was born in Japan, but I've never been back. And this is typically considered very strange. My parents had planned to return to Japan for good after my father finished his schooling here, but that never transpired. We just stayed in the States. So So, oh, that is the wrong direction. Next. Thank you. So I was raised in Urbana, Illinois until I was 7 or so. So I came here when I was almost 3, and I was in Urbana until I was about 7. We lived in apartments owned by the University of Illinois that were especially for married students with children. This isn't exactly where I lived. I couldn't find the photo of the exact apartment that I lived in, so you can get this off the website. So it was for married students who had children who had families. As a result, it was full of international graduate students, like my father, and their international families. So there were lots of kids like me in the neighborhood, and many of them were actually Japanese. And I'm going to show you just a quick little clip of the preschool that they have in the neighborhood, because I think it really encapsulates very well what my life was like at that point in time. So, ta-da. It will be a YouTube video. It's going to pop up in a second here. So this is a modern video, obviously, but this is very much the context in which I grew up. So there were kids from all different countries there, very international neighborhood. And I actually went to preschool in this very building. And if you look at the kids, sometimes if you can see either their name tags or the names on the backs of the seats, you can see that they're from all over the world. Right, like there's Andreas and Sheila. You get the picture. So that was pretty much what my life was like, until I went to elementary school. So, very international, lots of Japanese friends. But I did notice that after a period of time, a lot of my Japanese friends would go back to Japan. And we didn't, we're still there. So we moved to North Carolina after my father finished his PhD. And that's when things started to get weird, because I was no longer surrounded by international kids. Right? That's kind of all I'd known until then. And the ones I did meet, the international kids that I did meet, were just arriving into the United States, so they were just new. So I didn't really feel like I fit in with that, especially since I was basically a native speaker of English. Although I'm happy to answer questions about that later. I do have some slips that you'll notice if you talk to me a lot. But the international students looked upon me as if I were an American, and the Americans looked upon me like I was a foreigner. So this sense of being in between became very pronounced when I was looking at colleges, right? So fast forward to high school. I graduated from Lincoln Northeast, just down the road from here in Lincoln, and I'd gotten a scholarship to UNL. But truth be told, I wasn't sure I was going to be able to use it. See, I was still classified as an international student, and I was still on a visa. So as many of you in this room know, one needs to be a permanent resident or to have a green card to be considered a domestic student. So while I graduated from a Nebraska high school, I was technically an international student. And I wasn't sure how UNL would feel about that once it figured it out. So I ended up going elsewhere, and I was classified as an international student there, and I was on an F1 visa. By the way, I have an extensive collection of visas. I have an F1, I've had an F2, I've had a J2, and I think I also had an H4. Not that we're in a conference. So my roommate was an international student. This was in college. My roommate was an international student from Croatia. You guys will probably know better than I, but it seems like they pair international students with other international students in the dorms. And I did international student orientation. I hung out with international students, and I helped lead the international club. But to most people, including some international students, I looked and sounded like an American. I would guess that most of my professors thought I was an American, just like all of the Asian American kids in class. But as many of you know, visa status makes a big difference. So I felt different from American students because I had a visa. And growing up, I was always worried about it running out or getting in trouble and getting deported. I would love to hear if you've had similar experiences. And in fact, I can tell you just a quick story. When I was in high school in Lincoln, I was hanging out with some of my friends. They were all American. And I think it was like a Friday night or something, we were hanging out, and we had watched a movie, and then, this was before Netflix and all this stuff. So we watched a movie, and then we decided to go hang out outside. It was evening, nighttime, and my friend lived near a construction site. They were building some new houses. And I don't know if you guys do this, but if there's like a new construction site going up, you kind of go and walk around and see what's going on there. Does anybody else do this? Lynn does this, thank you. So we went out there, and it was evening time. It was nighttime. And apparently this is illegal. I didn't know this, right? So, we were hanging out, we were looking at the buildings. There are these big, construction, bulldozers and stuff there, which we thought were cool. Yeah, but this is apparently illegal, so the cops showed up. And I was worried, right? Because all my friends were American, they're like, oh no, we're gonna get in trouble. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, so how serious is this? Am I gonna get deported? I don't really speak Japanese. I've never been there since I was 3, right? So this is the kind of stuff that was going through my head. So that was kind of a very prevalent part of my kind of psyche growing up. And in addition to that, there were always these trips to big cities to get my passport renewed. So, traveling to Atlanta or Chicago or Kansas City or Denver or whatever was the nearest big Japanese consulate to get my passport renewed. These were things my American friends didn't know about. Studying abroad when I was in college, for me it had this extra layer of complication that it didn't for my American friends, because I would have to get another visa to go to another country. And then in November, during the election, I couldn't vote, of course. And I went to a really politically active school, so I had to keep telling people over and over that I wasn't a citizen and I couldn't vote. Because everybody would be like, oh, are you voting? Make sure you register to vote. And I'd have to say, well, okay, I'm not a citizen. So it was this kind of reiteration over and over that I wasn't an American, that I didn't fit in. So I got my green card right before my junior year. And while I didn't feel any different as a person, the United States government and my school suddenly treated me differently. They treated me like a domestic student. So I could receive federal financial aid. I didn't need to worry about being sponsored for a job after I graduated, right? I didn't need to go and get a job that would sponsor a visa for me. And I decided that I could do a study abroad trip in Greece, since it was now a whole lot easier to do it. And about 6 years after that, I was naturalized and I became a US citizen. And my father did too, but my mother didn't, and she's still a permanent resident actually. And as a side note, my friend who is German just got naturalized like a month ago. And the difference between Germany and Japan is that she gets to keep dual citizenship, right? So she gets to have both. And that's not the case with Japan, and that's part of the reason why my mother never got citizenship, is because she didn't want to give up her Japanese citizenship. So immigrants to a country are often categorized by the generation of their citizenship, like first generation, second generation. How many of you have heard this before? Maybe. Okay, cool. So first generation immigrants are the ones that came to the States and were naturalized. Right? Second generation are their children, they're born here, and so on, right? Third generation, fourth generation. So this is a photo, and it's of a diner called the Nisei Grill. And specifically for Japanese immigrants, the first generation is called Issei, the first generation. The second generation is called Nisei. So this was apparently a grill that was owned by probably a second generation Japanese American. It shows up, if you follow the link and you go to the website, these are all credits to where you can find these photos. It leads you to a website about Japanese American internment camps. So presumably this was owned by a second generation Japanese American. And if you read the sign in the corner, it says this restaurant under new management will open again soon. So a lot of Japanese Americans, when they were moved to internment camps during World War II, they had to give up their property. They had to find a way to sell it quick. So if you owned like a diner, you would sell it to somebody and they would try to get the best price because they knew that you had to get rid of the thing, right? So this is presumably what's going on in this photo. Okay, so I'm technically a first-generation immigrant. I'm East State technically. And so was my father. But he's more of the typical first-generation immigrant. He came here as an adult. He's a non-native speaker of English, and he was socially regarded by Americans as an outsider. But Americans always thought I was a second-generation immigrant, right? They always assumed I was born here. And I pretty much felt like I had been here my whole life. But I felt different from the Asian Americans I met in college because they had a comfort with their status that I didn't, right? They felt entitled and empowered to make demands of their society and of their country because it was, well, their country, but it wasn't mine. So being deported was always a palpable threat to me. Like I said, I'd be curious to know if you've heard of similar stories from other immigrants. I know my German friend was always, like, she's such a goody two-shoes, but she was always concerned about, if something happens, am I gonna get deported? So if I did anything wrong, like misfile some papers, or have a strange result on a health screen. So if you're born in Japan, you're inoculated for tuberculosis, so you have a little bit of TB in you. So when they do a TB test on you, it can come back positive and people can think that you have tuberculosis, for example. So if having a strange result on a health screen or getting in trouble with the law, if any of these things happen, I was worried that I would get kicked out, right? And as I said, I couldn't vote, so I also didn't feel entitled to take political action. I was here as a guest, essentially. So I never really felt a part of either generation, first or second. I'd always felt in between there, too. Not only was I not Japanese or American, I didn't know what generation of Japanese American I was. And since I was naturalized at age 26, even the term Japanese American is new to me, right? I've been Japanese longer than I've been Japanese American. But I recently learned that there are more of us. And they've even given us a designation. It's called Generation 1.5. I Googled it a while ago, and there's like all these studies about Generation 1.5. It's amazing. So we come to America as young children, and we feel as much American as we do foreign. And guess what? Studies of Generation 1.5 have found that oftentimes we feel like we don't belong anywhere. But you know what they've also found? They've found that we're flexible, adaptable, and resilient. We know how to change in response to different cultural contexts around us. And that also means that we're sensitive to noticing the different cultural contexts around us. It means we're appreciating what's unique and valuable about differences in language, food, music, religion, history, and perspectives, all the things we've been learning about this week. And the bigger your sample size, the more appreciation and empathy we can build for each other, and the richer our understanding of what it means to be human. And that's not just a job skill, that's a life skill. We all need to be able to make connections across cultural and even personal differences, right? Especially in this day and age. And those, I find, are some of the most rewarding relationships. And I think that's why we're all here in this room, regardless of whether you're American or international or somewhere in between. Thank you. So I'm happy to take questions. I would love to hear any of your stories of immigration or anything you've heard from your parents or your grandparents. The cool thing about America is that a lot of people have these kinds of stories that they've had passed down through the generations. So, and I'm happy to answer any questions too. Yeah.
Did your parents not speak Japanese when you were growing up?
They did. So this is an interesting first-gen, second-gen thing. They did. And my mother actually spoke a lot more Japanese because my father worked outside the home, but my mother stayed in the home. But it's very common for second-generation immigrants for first-generation immigrants to push a lot of English onto the second gens because they wanted to fit in. That wasn't really explicitly pushed on me, but you know, I was going to an American school. My dad spoke a lot more English at home, probably to try to acculturate me. And there's this other thing that among Japanese communities, and I think some other language communities do this too, where in big cities you have Japanese language schools, right? So on Saturday or something, you go there and you get taught Japanese language so you don't lose it. We didn't do that. We're kind of an unconventional family, so we didn't do that. Also, I didn't live in these big cities like Chicago or Kansas City or New York or wherever where they have these. So I don't, yeah, so I have some Japanese, but it's not awesome. But there are immigrant communities where if you come from an area that has a lot more, like I just didn't have many Japanese people around me after I left Urbana. But if you come from one of these larger communities, you'll find people who said, oh man, I went to Japanese school. Yeah, Mike.
Yeah, I've been recently watching Kim's Convenience on Netflix, which is about second-generation Korean children.
I think I've heard of this, but I haven't seen it.
It's wonderful, but they have the values of their Korean parents, and then of course, they live in a place where there's a lot of Korean people, and because of that, they have this identity as being, they're Canadian, Korean Canadian, and they have assimilated, created, it's a culture of their own, not Canadian, not Korean, but you didn't have that opportunity because of where you lived. It wasn't an extraordinary number of Japanese American second generation people. Am I right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay. So because of that, now that you're older, and when you encounter other people in similar situations, do you feel like you've kind of found your people or not?
I think maybe so, and in fact, when I learned that there was a Gen 1.5 thing, I was like, oh my gosh, this is a thing. I'm not like this weirdo, just like, that is not like anybody else. So yeah, I do kind of feel like, but do you mean like, have I found my people, if I meet somebody from, like in college I met, like people from Hawaii or something, right, that have been living around Asian Americans all their lives. And do you mean like, do I feel a kinship to them?
Well, I think maybe kind of finding maybe a third culture maybe, because like, I think especially like in San Francisco, they're Koreatown.
Right.
But they have an identity, even almost a linguistic identity that they have. Do you feel that that's something that's there for you or not?
I probably not. I don't really feel kinship with those groups because I didn't grow up in that sort of community either. Yeah, there was something else you said that I was going to comment on that I've forgotten now. But no, I mean, I had some, in college again, I had a friend from Las Vegas who, she's Asian American, and she had grown up with a lot of Asian people in the Las Vegas area. But I didn't feel a part of that because I wasn't tapped into that community either. Oh, sorry.
Was your choice not to go back to Japan a sort of conscious decision you made, or is this something you never got around to, or could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I think it's considered weird. Does it seem weird to you? Yeah. I think it's considered weird. A lot of people are like, what, you've never been back? It was kind of semi-conscious. One of the issues is that it's like astronomically expensive to fly there, right? So when I was a kid, when we were growing up, I think we just didn't go there because we also weren't sure we could afford to go there. All of us. Like, I'm an only child, but there are 3 of us then. So I think it was partially a conscious decision not to go back there. I think, we would call on the phone to my grandparents and to my uncle. But yeah, it was partially a conscious decision. And then as I grew older, I just never got around to it. So that's on me. And then I think my mother actually went back a few years ago. She went back for quite a period, like 6 months or something. So
Is there still family there that you could connect to, that you would like to connect to, and that sort of thing?
Yes, sort of, right? So my Japanese isn't awesome. Their English is not awesome. So in terms of like doing a translation, that's kind of difficult too. So I feel in that context that I would feel very much like an American tourist almost, and I don't know how they would regard me. I mean, that's an interesting question, right? And kind of an interesting experience perhaps to go through and to document, but also kind of scary. So.
kind of just along those lines, if you went back now, there would be the expectation because you're Japanese that you'd be able to just fit right in. And so there would be that sense of awkwardness on the other side
Yeah.
of the question.
Yeah, and I've often wondered about that too, like how much of how Japanese I read to Japanese people. So, you know, maybe they would, I don't know if they could pick up that from just kind of looking at me, oh, she's not Japanese, she's American. I have a Japanese name, so, you know, I don't have an American first name, so, but on the other hand, I do now